No matter how rich, how famous, or how many awards someone has won, there's one group of people who will never be truly impressed by them, and that's their own kids. To a 4-year-old, an Oscar winner is just the person who won't let me have ice cream before dinner. A Grammy-winning musician is just the person who is taking way too long in the bathroom. A former president is just, Dad, embarrassing me at my birthday party again. And every now and then, these kids say something so blunt, so unfiltered, and so brutally honest that their famous parents have no choice but to laugh, cringe, and end up telling the story to the entire world during an interview. What follows are some of the most relatable, funniest, and most human moments where celebrity kids completely humbled their A-list parents, proving that fame might buy you a lot of things, but it will never, ever buy you immunity from your own children's opinions. Gwyneth Paltrow has an Academy Award, runs a sprawling wellness and lifestyle business, and is married to a respected Hollywood film and TV composer. By almost any measure, she's one of the most accomplished people in the entertainment industry. And yet, according to her daughter Apple, none of that matters the moment Gwyneth tries to have a little too much fun in public. Speaking on a talk show, Paltrow admitted that her daughter finds her mortifying for what most people would consider an extremely minor offense, simply being a bit too enthusiastic. According to Paltrow, the threshold is almost comically low. If she does anything beyond standing perfectly still and staying quiet, say, swaying along to a song, clapping a little too loudly, or laughing too big, Apple's reaction is instant. Paltrow described how the moment she starts to dance even slightly, her teenage daughter turns red in the face and immediately begs her to stop. What makes this story so universally relatable isn't the celebrity element at all. It's the fact that almost every parent of a teenager has lived some version of this exact moment. There's a particular age where children go from thinking their parents are the coolest, most exciting people on earth, to suddenly becoming hyper-aware of every single thing their parents do in front of other people. A parent who once got genuine applause for a goofy dance at a birthday party suddenly becomes a walking liability at the school drop-off line. It doesn't matter if that parent has won industry awards for their work. To their own child, in that specific moment, they are simply the embarrassing mom who won't stop dancing in the kitchen, and there is no version of fame, fortune, or critical acclaim that changes that dynamic. Sticking with the same family for a moment, Apple's father is Chris Martin, frontman of one of the most commercially successful rock bands of the last few decades, a band whose stadium tours sell out arenas across multiple continents. You might assume that having a dad who headlines massive stadium shows would translate into some serious, cool points with your peers. According to Martin himself, it does not work that way at all. He shared that his daughter works at a retail clothing store, and the dynamic of, my dad is a famous musician, apparently does not survive contact with the realities of a part-time job and a circle of teenage co-workers and friends. There's something almost poetic about this. Here is a musician whose songs are heard by tens of thousands of people a night, whose face appears on magazine covers and concert posters around the world, and to his own daughter, none of that is currency in the place where she actually spends her time. If anything, it might be the opposite. Having a famous parent can sometimes make a teenager feel like they have to work even harder to be seen as a normal person in their own right, separate from so-and-so's kid. To Apple, in the context of her everyday life, Chris Martin isn't a rock icon. He's just the guy who shows up and potentially embarrasses her by being recognized, which, for a teenager trying to blend in, might be the single worst thing a parent could possibly do. During the height of the pandemic, when households around the world were suddenly transformed into makeshift classrooms, actor Max Greenfield discovered a brand new and highly specific way to embarrass his daughter, by simply existing in the same house as her during school hours. His daughter, Lily, was in the middle of a virtual class, one of those Zoom sessions where every student's microphone could pick up literally anything happening in the background of their home, when her father started singing somewhere nearby. Lily was not having it. She turned around, visibly mortified, and made it extremely clear to her dad that he needed to stop immediately, because her teacher and her entire class could hear everything happening in the background of her house. It's hard to overstate just how perfectly this captures the strange, claustrophobic reality of pandemic-era family life. 4 months, there was no separation between home and school or home and work. Everyone was crammed into the same space, attempting to maintain some version of normal life while also being acutely aware that anyone on a video call could hear absolutely everything. A parent who might normally sing in another room without a second thought suddenly became a live broadcast hazard. And for a kid already nervous about how they're coming across to their teacher and classmates on camera, having your dad start belting out a tune in the background is the stuff of nightmares. It's a reminder that, famous or not, you don't need millions of followers to embarrass your kid. You just need a working set of vocal cords, a thin wall, and zero awareness of your surroundings at exactly the wrong moment. Hilary Duff learned the hard way that small children make absolutely terrible secret keepers, especially when those secrets involve their parents' more private moments. Duff shared on social media that her young daughter, Banks, had apparently told an extremely detailed story to her soccer coaches while at camp, a story involving something that had happened to Hilary, recounted in vivid and entirely unnecessary detail. Duff found out about this secondhand, through a friend who had heard the story from the coaches themselves, and her reaction, posted publicly, was a simple, exasperated, "Don't trust your kids." There's something almost universal buried in this story, and it has nothing to do with Hollywood. Anyone who has spent time around a small child knows that they operate with a complete and total disregard for the concept of private information. A 4-, 5-, or 6-year-old genuinely does not understand why certain stories shouldn't be shared with literally anyone who happens to be standing nearby. A teacher, a coach, a stranger at the grocery store, it doesn't matter. To them, a funny or interesting story is a funny or interesting story, and it deserves to be told regardless of audience. For a celebrity parent, this takes on an extra layer of stakes. What gets repeated to a soccer coach could, in theory, end up as a headline. But for any parent, famous or not, it's the same horrifying realization. Your kids are out there in the world right now, representing you, and you have absolutely no control over what they're saying. John Legend was once asked, during an interview, a question that seems almost designed to produce a confession. Had he ever pulled up to his kid's school in the drop-off line, blasting his own music loudly enough for everyone around him to hear? His answer was immediate, and a little sheepish, yes. But the story doesn't end there. Legend went on to point out that his children attend school alongside the kids of several other extremely famous musicians, meaning that the drop-off line at their school is essentially a procession of chart-topping artists, each one potentially blasting their own songs, each one a potential source of embarrassment for their own kids. It's a wonderfully specific image once you sit with it. Picture a long line of cars outside a school, each one driven by someone whose voice or music has been heard by millions of people, and inside each car, a kid in the back seat, sinking lower into their seat, hoping against hope that today is not the day their dad decides to turn the volume up. For most families, the embarrassing drop-off line moment involves a parent waving too enthusiastically out the window or yelling, "I love you, have a good day," a little too loudly. For this particular school, it apparently involves a rotating cast of platinum-selling musicians, each unknowingly competing for the title of most mortifying parent in the carpool lane. Not every embarrassing moment in a famous family comes from the kids themselves. Sometimes the parent is the source of the embarrassment, and the kid in question is fully grown and just has to sit there and absorb it. Back when Jessica Simpson's pop music career was at its commercial peak, her father, Joe Simpson, became known for giving interviews that tended to focus a little too heavily on his daughter's physical appearance rather than her work as an artist. In one particularly widely discussed interview, he made comments about Jessica's figure that came across as so inappropriate that they became their own talking point in entertainment coverage, with various outlets pointing out, fairly bluntly, that Jessica was a singer, not a fashion model, and that her father's comments seemed to miss that distinction entirely. This story is a useful reminder that embarrassing your kid isn't always a cute, harmless dynamic. Sometimes it crosses into territory that's genuinely uncomfortable, and the person on the receiving end isn't a 6-year-old who'll forget about it by dinner time, but an adult who has to deal with the public fallout of their parents' words. It also flips the typical script of these stories. Usually, we picture a famous adult being humbled by their small, honest child. Here, it's the reverse, a grown, famous daughter, embarrassed by a parent who seemingly couldn't read the room. It's proof that this dynamic between parents and their kids doesn't disappear once the kid becomes a successful adult in their own right. If anything, when a parent is also navigating life in the public eye, the stakes, and the embarrassment, can get even bigger. Will Smith is famously affectionate with his children, openly, demonstratively, and without much self-consciousness. According to his son Jaden, that affection can occasionally tip over into a little too much, especially when cameras are involved. During an interview conducted in Thailand, Will Smith leaned over and planted a big kiss on Jaden, right there in front of the cameras. Jaden's reaction was instant and very real. He jumped up out of his seat, visibly startled and embarrassed, and the public display of fatherly affection ended up becoming its own small news story in entertainment coverage at the time. Years later, Jaden addressed this broader pattern directly in an interview of his own. He didn't frame it as resentment, exactly, more as a gentle, very reasonable boundary. He acknowledged that he appreciates the love his father shows him, but pointed out, essentially, that there's a time and a place for that kind of affection, and a press junket with cameras rolling probably isn't it. It's a small but telling moment, a son who clearly loves his father, navigating the slightly surreal experience of having very normal, very human family dynamics play out in front of an audience. Most teenagers have, at some point, had to gently, or not so gently, tell a parent, "Not in front of my friends." Jaden's version of that conversation just happened to take place on a global stage, with cameras and journalists watching the whole thing unfold. Even a former president of the United States isn't exempt from this rule, which might be the most reassuring fact in this entire list. During a 4th of July celebration, Barack Obama did something that fathers everywhere instinctively understand. He interrupted the festivities to lead the crowd in a round of "Happy Birthday" for his daughter Malia. According to reports from the time, Malia's reaction was about what you'd expect from any teenager suddenly finding themselves the center of a large group's attention, on command, with no warning. She was visibly less than thrilled. In that moment, whatever else was true about the day, the security detail, the historic setting, the fact that her father held arguably the most powerful position on the planet, none of it mattered to Malia in the way it might have mattered to everyone else watching. To her, in that specific second, he wasn't the President of the United States. He was just her dad, making a scene at her birthday, the exact same way countless other dads have made countless other kids cringe at countless other birthday parties. If the leader of the free world can't escape the universal teenage reaction of, "Dad, please, everyone is looking," then truly, nobody can. Some celebrity parents don't even pretend that embarrassing their kids is an accident. They own it completely, as a matter of principle. Lionel Richie has been refreshingly upfront about this, stating plainly that he considers it part of his job as a father to embarrass his children as much as possible. It's not framed as cruelty, it comes across more as a kind of parental rite of passage, almost a badge of honor. And according to his daughter, Nicole Richie, it absolutely works. She's admitted that she finds it difficult to even watch her father dance, because the second-hand embarrassment is simply too much for her to handle. There's something almost admirable about a parent who fully leans into this dynamic rather than fighting it. Most of the stories in this list involve parents who are a little surprised, or a little sheepish, when they realize they've embarrassed their kids. Lionel Richie, by contrast, appears to view it as a deliberate strategy, almost a form of bonding, even if his daughter might describe it differently. It's the parenting equivalent of a dad who intentionally tells the same dad joke at every family gathering, fully aware of the groans it produces, and enjoying every second of it. Courtney Cox found out, somewhat by accident, that revealing certain details about your child's personal interests in a public interview can have real consequences, for the child, and for the thing they used to love. Cox once shared publicly that her daughter, Coco, had an extensive Barbie collection, information that Coco, understandably, had not necessarily signed off on broadcasting to the world. According to Cox, once this fact became public knowledge, Coco was so embarrassed by the attention that she ended up getting rid of the entire collection. Almost overnight, something that had been one of Coco's favorite things in the world became something she no longer wanted any part of. It's a small story, but it carries a genuinely interesting lesson about childhood, identity, and the strange power that outside attention can have on something that used to feel completely private and personal. A toy collection that exists quietly in a child's bedroom is just a toy collection, a source of comfort, fun, and personal expression. The moment it becomes a topic of public conversation, even in a light-hearted way, it can transform into something the child feels self-conscious about, something that now feels like it belongs to everyone rather than just to them. For Coco, that shift was apparently enough to make her walk away from an entire collection she'd presumably spent years building. Sometimes the most embarrassing thing a celebrity parent can do to their kid isn't a joke, or a kiss on camera, or an enthusiastic dance. It's something as small and seemingly harmless as mentioning what's sitting on a shelf in their bedroom. Social media has added an entirely new dimension to the age-old dynamic of embarrassing parent versus mortified child, and Kate Hudson found that out when she shared a photo of herself in a bikini on Instagram. Her son, Ryder Robinson, by that point a young adult himself, reportedly expressed that he wasn't exactly thrilled about his mother's decision to post that particular photo publicly. What's interesting about this story is how it illustrates the way this dynamic evolves over time without ever really going away. It just changes shape. When kids are small, the embarrassment tends to revolve around very immediate, in-person moments. A parent singing too loudly, dancing at a party, or showing up at school in something mortifying. As those kids grow into teenagers and then adults, a lot of that in-person dynamic fades. But it gets replaced by something new and arguably more permanent. A photo posted online doesn't just exist for the people physically present in that moment. It exists indefinitely, visible to friends, co-workers, and strangers alike. For Ryder, the issue wasn't a fleeting moment of public embarrassment in front of a small group of people. It was the much larger, much more permanent question of what his mother's online audience would see, and what that might mean for how people perceived both of them. The specific complaints may have changed from, "Please don't sing in front of my friends," to, "Please don't post that." But the underlying feeling, a child wishing a parent had been a little more thoughtful about an audience, is exactly the same. Jennifer Garner recently gave one of the most relatable interviews on this entire topic, and what made it stand out wasn't any single dramatic anecdote, it was the tone. Garner simply acknowledged that the children she shares with Ben Affleck go through phases where they find her embarrassing, and she seemed entirely at peace with that. Rather than framing it as some kind of difficult confession, she talked about it the way most parents eventually learn to, as a normal, almost funny part of raising teenagers. What's worth sitting with here is just how universal this particular arc is. There's a stage of childhood, often the early years, where a parent is, in their child's eyes, basically a superhero. They can do no wrong. Their jokes are the funniest jokes in the world, their stories are the best stories, their presence at school events is something to be proud of, not avoided. And then, seemingly overnight, that flips. The same parent who once got genuine, delighted laughter for a silly voice or a goofy dance now gets eye rolls and a quiet, urgent, "Please don't." Garner's comments suggest she's made peace with this shift, understanding it not as a loss, but as simply what happens when kids grow into teenagers, develop their own sense of identity, and start caring deeply about how they're perceived by their peers. No amount of fame, it seems, changes that particular timeline. Every parent, whether they're a movie star or not, eventually has their "you're a little embarrassing now" era with their kids, and the only real choice is how gracefully they handle it. Sometimes, the most viral parent and child moments aren't planned bits or light-hearted jokes at all, they're simply real life, unfolding in front of a camera that was supposed to be capturing something else entirely. In one widely shared clip, a mother appeared on local television for what was meant to be a fairly standard interview, accompanied by her teenage son. Instead of the polished on-message segment that was presumably planned, what aired was something far more raw and unscripted, a clear, visible tension between a parent who wanted to share something on camera and a teenager who very obviously did not want to be part of that moment at all. What made the clip resonate with so many people wasn't the specific subject matter, it was the dynamic itself. Anyone who has ever tried to get a reluctant teenager to participate in a family photo, a video call with relatives, or any kind of "say hi to the camera" moment will recognize exactly what was playing out. There's a particular kind of discomfort that comes from being a teenager who is suddenly, unwillingly, the center of attention, especially when a parent is the one putting them in that position, with the best of intentions, but without necessarily checking in first. The clip became a sort of mirror for viewers. It wasn't really about the news segment at all. It was about that universal, slightly cringeworthy moment when a parent's enthusiasm for sharing something collides head-on with a kid's overwhelming desire to just not be looked at right now, please. At the end of the day, fame doesn't change the fundamentals of being a parent, or of being a kid. You can win major awards, headline world tours, hold the highest office in the land, or star in some of the biggest movies ever made, and none of it will stop your own child from looking you dead in the eye and telling you, in no uncertain terms, that you are so embarrassing. If anything, stories like these are oddly comforting, precisely because they strip away all the glamour and reveal something extremely ordinary underneath. Being mortified by your parents, or being the parent who's doing the mortifying, often without even realizing it, might just be one of the most universal human experiences there is. It doesn't care about red carpets, box office numbers, or chart positions. It just shows up, usually at the worst possible moment, and reminds everyone involved that no matter how big your life gets on the outside, at home, you're still just somebody's slightly cringe-inducing mom or dad, and somebody's wonderfully blunt, completely unimpressed kid.